and
How are you?
I'm okay.
Good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys too.
Haven't seen you since last year.
Yeah, yeah. It's true.
It's been a while.
Well, I survived South Asia, so.
So you're good for Portland.
Hmm?
There's 7 of us. Seems like a Fulton.
Hi, Catherine. How are you doing? Oh.
We're going to get started. This is the Portland Planning Sustainability Commission meeting of March 11th, 2014. Our agenda today is order of business, items of interest from the commissioners, director's report from Joe. We have a consent agenda, consideration of minutes from 1/28/14, and then proposed street vacation of Southeast Grand Avenue between Hawthorne Boulevard and Southeast Madison. And then we have 3 briefings. The first one, stormwater overview. The second one, a comp plan update, working draft part 2, what we heard. And the third, Interpal Outer Division project, a briefing. Let's start with items of interest from the commissioners. Howard.
Sitting in a hole
You're kind of small.
I think you can adjust the height.
yeah, you can. I'll get. The meeting, the newly formed Citizen Involvement Committee, CIC, met a week or so ago with 6 new members, all unusually qualified people representing both their district, their ethnicity, their age, and so forth, and are continuing the work around their contribution to the requirement that they be reporting to us occasionally around the comp plan. So that meeting is accomplished, and we're meeting. I want to stress again to all of you eager commissioners that there's room for one more of us in that committee if anybody has any interest, or perhaps if our new youth member might want to join that group as a citizen involvement group thing. Anyway, it's meeting, doing well.
Good. Thank you. Other items of interest?
Quick update. So the West Quadrant Stakeholders Advisory Committee, it's a mouthful, had an open house last night at City Hall. In talking with Carl, I think there ended up being about a total of 75 attendees, which was pretty good. And so we're continuing to move forward, hoping to wrap up here. I think it's around June, July-ish.
Good. Sounds good. Any other? Oh, yeah. Gary?
I just wanted to say welcome back to you all, or welcome back to me, to you all. And a couple of comments. One, in Sri Lanka, South Asia, I got to experience a whole different level of population density and habitation density, and it was a fairly profound experience to come back to Portland, which is empty. And then I have a question for you all and for staff, and that is that in light of the recent legislative decision around Columbia River crossing, do we need to make further statement to the City Council regarding West Hayden Island in light of what's going on legislatively and funding? Or
I don't know, but that was a question I was going to also kind of get to a couple other outcomes of that decision also. Can we
Well,
talk to you about that a little bit?
yeah, we just started to talk about that ourselves in terms of what the implications are. And the one that we're focused on first is what do we do with the comp plan, which our metro traffic model, which is, the network assumed that there was a bridge in 2035. So we have to go back and see what Metro is going to do about all of that and how that affects our comprehensive planning thinking. And there were a number of items in the East Hayden Island plan that we did a few years ago that presumed a bridge. So we have to sort of think through the implications of that, not the street plan mostly, not being arranged in the way it was, and what the relative priority of that is. It didn't change anything on the ground in terms of regulation. It's just part of the plan. So it may be something that we have some time to wait on, but the comprehensive plan piece of this, we have to have a path forward because we're bringing the comprehensive plan to you all this fall.
The other part of that kind of question was the climate action plan, because the Metro plan assumed a certain level of traffic. I remember way back when, and the climate action plan was taking that traffic pattern into place. So as you look at that, I'd be interested to know kind of if there's impacts on the climate action plan in terms of, I don't know, increased CO2 emissions or something, because there's, I guess, an assumption it would be lower.
Yes. Well, all those, it's funny, the thing with these metro traffic models too, there's always slight variations between each of these big plans just because of time, but we're going to have to get them all to line up with a path without a CRC for planning purposes.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. March 19th at 4 o'clock, we have a joint PDC PSC meeting, 4 o'clock.
Correct? 4 to 6?
I understand that it's to talk about the Central East Side. And so is there preparation that's going to happen for that meeting, or are we just going in cold, or what's going to happen?
Well, we, so it's the agenda is a presentation to both commissions that's sort of built around the work that was just done recently with the Urban Land Institute Rose Fellows, which was a group in town that was studying the Central East Side with us for a week-long effort. So there's, I don't believe we had planned on sending a briefing package in advance, but to use the briefing at the meeting to sort of to in part brief the commission on the issues that we're seeing and to raise some questions for discussion. So it wasn't, so all you need to know would be presented at the meeting. Part of the purpose of this first meeting, and Andre and the chair of the PDC Commission are going to frame this for us, but it's just to open up line of communication between the two commissions. And we chose the Central East Side question because the two commissions, from their different sort of responsibilities, are both touching ground over there, but really do have different responsibilities and different sort of aspects of it that they look at. So we thought it would be a fruitful way to tease out some of those cross-commission issues.
And I was going to add something, if I could find it, was at least the proposed agenda that we had, Susan had sent me, and
Now I have nothing on.
but the agenda that I saw was exactly as Joe had stated. Scott and I are going to get together on Thursday and talk about just kind of process and procedure and lay out some kind of format of questions to kind of go after the briefing. But it really is, at least at this initial one, to establish an ongoing process to meet with PDC maybe on a every 6-month basis to talk about these issues, because in the potential future there may be changes to the TIF districts and other things and so we're going to need to work closely together. So Central East Side I look at it as kind of a starting point for us to have a joint conversation and how we view things. What are one of the critical issues is, what are our specific roles, and how will we view decisions, and how do we view Central East Side in terms of our role as Planning Commission and sustainability from that standpoint.
So it's a jumping off point for more conversation.
Yes.
It's not a one-shot
Yes.
deal.
Oh, yeah, and it's,
Yes.
and there's no,
Good.
there's no decision, to be voted on. It's an
no.
opening of a conversation,
Okay.
and an interesting one, because there's so much overlap in, both commissions, both organizations are working so much and actually working together on the Southeast Quadrant issues.
So staff is working together to get us together. So hopefully this won't be the last one. It's going to be really a first one, and hopefully establish some kind of lines of communication of how we think about the city of Portland and aspects of the city of Portland, not only downtown, but out into the neighborhoods also, and about jobs. Other comments? I have one thing. Yesterday, Catherine and myself met with the mayor to talk about a proposal of us having a series of forums of how we deal with gentrification. So we're going to hear back from the mayor what he thinks about it or whatever. But and I apologize, I have not got it out to everybody, but I will get it out to everybody in terms of what we proposed, and kind of thinking about change in the neighborhoods, really about as the city grows, change comes in gentrification, depending on how you define it. Could be a lot of things, but how do the neighbors think about that process? And how could we help them with solutions of that process? Anything else, Joe?
Yeah, just we already talked about the next, the joint PSC and Planning and Development Commission meeting. It's Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. at PDC, which is 222 Northwest 5th Avenue. Second is a reminder that the climate change preparation strategy is out for public comment through mid-April. You should have received an email from Susan a couple of weeks ago with input or with information about providing comments and input to staff. So just a reminder that if you're interested in that, take a look at it and send comments back. And then finally, at each of your seats, you should have received a copy of the Bureau Planning and Sustainability Strategic Plan. So we just rolled this out last week, and it's the first, it's the second strategic plan we've done as a combined bureau back in those ancient days when there was a Bureau of Planning, a Office of Sustainable Development. It reflects, I think, a great amount of progress that we've made both in our practice and as an organization in bringing those two kind of world points of view and types of work together, and includes, our sort of the mission of the Bureau, a statement of really our values, how we do our work, and the emphasis we put on being creative, collaborative, connected, and credible. And then a sample of 12 sort of key initiatives that characterize our work in the next 3 years. We have a work program that's online as well that's more detailed than this. So this isn't everything, but this we thought were projects that we particularly wanted to highlight because they helped tell the story or translate the story of what it is that we say we're about and what it is that we're doing.
There's one other item. One other item to mention is also on March 19th at 6:30 at Park Rose High School. There's going to be a rates public forum with City Council.
Oh.
So we're really encouraging our students to get involved and all of our East Portland residents to attend this rates public forum by City Council at the high school.
This is
Howard?
our strategic plan too, isn't it? In reality, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, isn't this what you'd like us to help you implement?
Yes, I suppose that's a good way to look at it.
First of all,
Maybe.
why didn't we have any input? But okay, that's fine. Other than that, it seems to me that we're your
just need to
strongest
do it.
ally pulling off this 3-year deal.
The commission's a very important ally to do that, yes. Yeah.
And
Why didn't I see this earlier?
I would comment that I like on the very back page, these are the goals and the measurements by which we're going to measure ourselves and BPS. Is that correct, Joe? Yeah. I think that's great. It's a good piece. Howard. Consent agenda. Consideration of minutes and have people seen the street vacation? Any comments or anything?
Move adoption of the consent agenda?
I'll second.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Consent agenda passes. We'll start with stormwater overview, a briefing. We have Marie Walkowitz.
Very good.
And this is a briefing.
Sally's going to start us out.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning and Sustainability Commission. I'm Sally Edmonds with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I manage the Central City River and Environmental Planning teams, and I'm just thrilled to be able to introduce BES to you today for their presentation on stormwater. Throughout the comprehensive plan process, there's been very close collaboration between BPS and BES. In fact, I probably see Marie about once a week. We've been trying to integrate all aspects of stormwater into the comprehensive plan. So when you receive a draft of it this summer, you'll see that it's addressed in multiple chapters. It's in the watershed health chapter. It's in a section that relates to design with nature, and it also appears in our public facilities chapter. So today, BES staff will give you an overview of Portland stormwater management systems, the linkages to land uses, and some work that we're planning to do to address the challenges. So, thanks.
Marie Walkowitz, Bureau of Environmental Services. I serve on the Johnson Creek Watershed team, and I'm also a Bureau liaison to the Comprehensive Plan. And I'm here with Dawn Uchiyama and Elizabeth Reese-Cadigan, who have other expertise on stormwater management. And so we'll be talking with you about stormwater management in the comp plan. And I want to just extend our thank you to Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for the opportunity to be collaborators in the update to the comprehensive plan. It's been a very rich process, and I think really represents an important evolution in land use practice. When I started as a planner about 15 years ago, there was a lot of really solid attention to the relationship between land use planning and transportation planning and how we could work on those two aspects of our communities in a way that met our broader community goals and made good use of public investment. And that has yielded some really wonderful communities, some great improvements in our different neighborhoods. What we're going to be talking about today is adding in another element, which is looking at the way water plays across the landscape and across urban development, and how we can do that in a way that provides broader benefits to the communities and makes good use of our infrastructure dollars. So I'm very excited about the direction the comprehensive plan is going and the opportunity to talk with you about stormwater management today. And before we get started, I'm going to start with a little apology. Our expertise is in stormwater management and planning. It is not in technical issues, and we're operating today with a new operating system that we're not familiar with. So you may notice a few little bumps along the way. So, oops. See, we've started with bumps already. Normally, I do know how to do this. Oh, goodness. So we'll start with a little Stormwater Management 101, and some of this will be review for you, but there may be some new information for you. Sometimes we start out in the middle of the conversation without realizing that there's some basic factors in stormwater management that we deal with every day that might not be apparent to others. So we want to make sure we have a strong foundation. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of what Portland's doing to manage stormwater through our various stormwater management systems, make a linkage to land use planning and transportation planning, and also what developers deal with and some of the issues that ratepayers are concerned about, and then get into what our current comp plan says and preview a little bit about what you'll see in the comprehensive plan that'll come before you in a few months, and then talk about comprehensive plan implementation. Okay, so now here's where we're going to really take a leap of faith, technologically. So we want to start with this video from Seattle, and we're doing that because they did a really good job of capturing some of the issues that we're dealing with every day, and makes it very visual, very you can really understand it. And then after that, we'll get into the more details about how Portland is different. Oh.
Stormwater is water from rain and snow events that runs over the ground surface and into drainage ditches and pipes. When precipitation falls on undeveloped natural land like this forest, most of it soaks into the soft duff and underlying forest soils, rather than just running directly into streams and lakes. In this way, water becomes cleaner by the time it enters streams. Soil particles and microscopic organisms help clean and purify groundwater. Nature provides its own water quality control. Water moving through the soil also keeps the amount of water in streams and rivers at natural levels and results in fewer floods. This is good water quantity control. Not too much water in streams in the winter, but enough water in them in the summer. Stormwater that soaks deeply into soil becomes groundwater. Groundwater travels slowly through soil to streams all year. This trickling of groundwater into streams is called base flow. Groundwater trickling into streams in the summer cools them, since Earth is cooler than air. Cooler water is healthier for salmon and other water creatures. Now let's talk about developed land, which means land that's no longer natural forest but has roads and buildings and people on it. Precipitation hits the hard surfaces of developed land like a building roof, a paved road, a driveway, a sidewalk, or a parking lot. This includes land that has had its soft duff layer stripped off, its trees cut down, or its soil compacted to a harder, less absorbing, less permeable surface. Stormwater runs more quickly over hard developed land surfaces and more directly into streams, rivers, and lakes. This stormwater doesn't have a chance to soak into the earth below the hard surfaces and prevents stormwater from becoming healthy groundwater. In the natural scheme of things, tree and plant leaves capture rainwater and let it evaporate back into the air. Roots capture water and use it to grow, and in doing so, they transpire it, release it back into the air. Undeveloped land, like a forest, has a lot more natural vegetation, so more rainwater is captured and released back to the air. Developed land has fewer trees and plants, so more rainwater turns into stormwater. There can be a lot more stormwater on the hard surfaces of developed land during rains. This is called flashiness, because streams and rivers in developed areas flash into higher flow volumes more quickly during winter storm events, like in a flash flood. It means that in developed places, like much of the western part of King County, we have to manage the quantity of stormwater. We have to install roadside ditches, culverts, catch basins, and stormwater pipes to capture and carry the increased stormwater runoff, and build things like expensive detention pond facilities to store the stormwater. All these ditches, pipes, and detention ponds make up what we call the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4. And we have to spend money to make sure all these things keep working, like this crew that's cleaning out the storm drains. We have to maintain our stormwater system so that people's lives and properties don't get harmed by flooding. Something that's also challenging for King County to protect is stormwater quality. It's critical to protect this water quality to keep humans and our environment healthy. Stormwater pollution includes oil and grease from cooking, pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers from yard care, fecal coliform bacteria from pet and farm animal waste, oil, gasoline, and metals from vehicles, and other pollutants. Some people think that stormwater is treated to remove this pollution. This is not true. Most stormwater in King County flows directly into streams, lakes, and rivers without quality water treatment. From there, it flows into Puget Sound. We hope you now see how important it is to keep pollution out of stormwater.
Back to another leap of faith as we go back to our other presentation. I want to emphasize that the basic principles in this are consistent with what BES does, but we do manage our stormwater differently than some of the examples that were shown. So as our presentation comes back up. So when we think about stormwater, many of the issues that Seattle has, we share. I mean, both communities are significantly shaped by the way water plays across the landscape, both the undeveloped and the developed. In Portland, we take a watershed perspective, and we think about how we manage stormwater and our natural resources differently in different parts of the city. So in Portland, we have 4 watershed areas that we manage, the Columbia Slough, the Johnson Creek watershed, the Fanout and Tryon systems, which are actually 2 different systems, but we manage them together, and the Willamette system. And when we're doing that, we're thinking about not just what happens in one particular area, but the relationship of activities in the uplands and in the tributaries and in the upper parts of our storm sewer systems to the waters to the places where the water ends up. So we know that everything is connected, and we need to think about the systems, these issues in a system-wide perspective. So now I'm going to turn over to Dawn, who's going to get into more specifics about how we actually manage stormwater through our stormwater systems.
So good afternoon. I'm Dawn Uchiyama from BES, and as Marie said, we're going to look at the stormwater systems now, and another way to look at it, Marie just showed you the watersheds. Another way to look at it is our regulated stormwater systems, and the boundaries for that are a little bit different. And you can see we've got 3 notes here on the map. Combined system, which means that the sanitary and stormwater flow together in the same pipe network, and then it's routed to the wastewater treatment plant on Columbia Boulevard and then discharged into the Willamette River. I'm sure you've heard about our big pipes that were created on both sides of the river to capture that combined water so that we weren't sending untreated sewage into the river. So that's our combined system. MS4, you heard in the video, that's when the storm water is separate. It's not combined with sanitary water, and it's routed to our streams and our rivers. So we often refer to it as surface water bodies. And then the third system is UIC, which stands for Underground Injection Control, which are basically sumps. There are these large concrete columns that go deep into the ground, and the water soaks into the ground on site. So we're regulated by the state and federal government for these 3 systems, and they all have different requirements. And what makes it even more interesting is that it's a patchwork quilt of BES assets or city assets and private property. So we don't control all the pieces. So we're regulated by the federal and state government, and we have to work with our ratepayers and private property owners to manage these systems. You can go to the next slide. So as we saw in the video, we have unmanaged stormwater from roofs and roadways and parking areas that create concerns for us or risks. And in Portland, we organized this around 3 concerns. You heard water quality. We often refer to it as pollutants or pollution prevention. The second is volume or velocity. That's the quantity and then how fast the water moves, which we also refer to as flow and volume control. And then conveyance, which is kind of new to the picture, where you need to have a place for the water to leave your site. It has to be approved by BES which system you're going to connect to. And again, there are conditions around each of those. Next slide. So we do this to mitigate the risks of erosion and stream impacts and combined sewer overflows, as I mentioned earlier, flooding, basement sewer backups. In some cases, we have sewage heading into people's basements, landslides, all sorts of things that affect people, the public health and safety of Portland. Next slide. And so the one really big idea that I want to make sure that everyone walks away with today is our stormwater hierarchy. And this is really how we organize our policy around stormwater management. And if you look at this, it goes from the highest preference, what we prefer, to the lowest preference. So the first box is impervious area reduction technique, and that includes eco roofs and pervious pavement. You want to keep the water before it flows off site. You want to keep it within the development. If you can't do it with an eco roof or pervious pavement, you can use landscape facilities or sumps, UICs. UICs fall into this category. The second box, on-site infiltration. So really our highest preference is to prevent the water from running off your site once you develop. So it's those first two boxes. If you can't do that, and I would say probably 2/3 of the city, you can't do that. You have to discharge water to one of our systems. We call it off-site conveyance. And basically you have two options: the storm system, or the MS4 system, as we've heard, which includes drainage ways, streams, rivers, or the CSO system, which is our last preference. We really don't want you sending stormwater to the combined sewer, because then obviously we run the risk of overflows and sending the water to the wastewater treatment plant, which we want to avoid. So this is the overarching policy for stormwater management in Portland in order of importance. Go to the next slide. So what are we doing in Portland? I think even though many folks, you're not stormwater experts, but definitely you know that Portland is a leader in this area. It's certainly a subject that many people hear about and know that Portland is a leader in the country, if not globally. And we have a stormwater management manual that includes that hierarchy that I just went through, where we've been making system improvements, Tabor to the River, and other programs you perhaps have seen BES implement. We have incentives and technical assistance for eco-roofs. We have grants and partnerships with the community. So we've been doing a lot over the past decade for stormwater, and we're definitely recognized for that leadership, but there's a lot more to do. And we've seen with technology and science and a change in our social and economic structure, we've just scratched the surface of what we can do. And I think we've got our policy more or less straight, and we understand how to implement some of these projects, but there's a big missing piece in terms of risk analysis and engineering, technical analysis that needs to go into what the system needs are. So this is when we get into land use. I think we have the right direction, but we need to make connections with other things that are happening in the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth, and she'll get into that.
Hi there. I'm Elizabeth Reese-Cadigan. My division is a system development division. We're here in this building actually working with developers and architects and planners, reviewing development proposals and land use reviews. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Don talked about the general challenges that we face, and I'm going to talk some more specifics about the challenges and some of the solutions that we can look at in dealing with stormwater on the ground. So developers face challenges with stormwater. They have to find a place to put the stormwater in their, within their project site. You can see sometimes they make some bad choices about overlapping their stormwater facility with some of the development, like that footing for the stairway right in the stormwater planter. They also need to figure out where to discharge the water. There can be oftentimes a conflict between discharging the stormwater on site, infiltration and setbacks, or if they have to discharge stormwater off site, getting the stormwater to the nearest stream or to the nearest pipe system can end up being costly. So there are trade-offs and costs for the developer in stormwater management. Some of the techniques that we are encouraging more and more often are, like Don said, the impervious area reduction techniques or low impact development where stormwater is integrated into the site design, such as that driveway on the photo on the right on the screen, where the stormwater can really be an amenity to the development as well as managed functionally. Reducing the number of impervious surfaces overall in the development. And then also, as Don mentioned, we have provided a number of different incentives and technical assistance over the years, like the EcoRoof FAR bonus and our Clean River Rewards program, just to help encourage developers to choose techniques when managing stormwater on their site that are an overall benefit to both the developer and to the city. Because when stormwater isn't managed well on site, then that's when it ends up causing problems for homeowners, neighbors, property owners. Problems such as runoff and erosion, which causes water quality problems for fish and wildlife in the streams, and also can impact property owners, such as the property on the left in the photo, which was placed in a poor location where a stream is actually flowing right onto the back patio. Also, problems with basement flooding, both the basement sewer backups that Don mentioned when stormwater flows into our combined system, as well as basement seepage when there is just a lot of stormwater directed to the ground, becomes groundwater in the wrong location and ends up in basements. And also landslides in previous generations of stormwater management. Stormwater is often just directed to the ground or the slope right outside people's homes, which ends up contributing to landslides in times like 1996 when we had quite a lot of rainwater falling at the same time that the ground was saturated, and that's when we end up with landslides and damage to property. So one thing that we do is try to protect the natural conveyance channels, and we have existing code, drainage reserve code that we call it, that protects water where it currently flows, try to prevent building structures right in the natural path of flow. We also have programs that are working to acquire areas that really are not safe for locating structures and development. And then we're also working to retrofit areas that have significant problems like basement sewer backup by removing some of the impervious area that's there, taking water out of the combined system. The photo that you see up there in the middle is Tabor School, where we're able to remove pavement and impervious area in an area that benefited the system and also provides an amenity to, an educational amenity to the school. So beyond the problems of developers and property owners, all Portlanders are ratepayers, so we share through the fees that we pay on our sewer bill in the challenges that we face with our system needs, preventing, we pay to prevent combined sewer overflows and improve water quality in our streams. We don't like to think about it, but as the video mentioned, water that flows off of impervious areas, rooftops, streets, it all ends up in our waterways. In the local streams, it causes erosion, which harms fish and wildlife, and that all ends up in our Willamette River, where we want to swim and boat and recreate. So it's a really important issue. We also, we've spent a lot of money, millions of dollars over the years, working on our combined system, investing money in the big pipe that you heard about. We'll be paying that off for the next 20 years. We're just realizing the magnitude of the separated system issues, and that's something that we need to approach in the wisest manner possible to spend ratepayer dollars in the most responsible way. So we're looking at integrated infrastructure planning and design. We need to look at new methods to share in the solutions. As Don mentioned, we don't own the entire separated stormwater system. There are private pipes and private drainage ways that run through people's backyards and through parks and open spaces, not all owned by the city. So this is a different kind of problem than we faced with the combined sewer problem. And we need to look at new methods of working on shared solutions in order to address our separated system problems. And we're also looking at green infrastructure because we found that and recognize that it's the most cost-effective method at managing stormwater in many cases, because we can address meet multiple objectives such as landscaping requirements and address urban heat island effect, habitat, as well as stormwater, and often improve transportation systems at the same time. In many ways, transportation planning is our next big challenge. We have often times in many parts of the west side and outer east side, we have we don't have a comprehensive stormwater system, and we also don't have a transportation system that meets our current standards, one transportation standard that we currently have. So we're lacking a system, which means that runoff often has nowhere to go. It impacts our ability to use the right-of-way, and improvements can be costly. The improvements to the stormwater system can often tip the scale in terms of whether we can afford to make street improvements in the area. Also, having just one standard for the street means it's not context sensitive to the area of town that you're in. And it also adds to the cost and often isn't what the neighborhood actually wants in that area. So we're looking at new standards. We've been partnering with PBOT to work on developing new street and stormwater standards, which Don will talk about in a moment. Standards that are sensitive to both the area where the street is and sensitive to what the neighborhood actually wants to see their street look like. We're looking at new processes, hopefully a new era of local improvement districts that where we can bring the cost down to something that's reasonable and folks actually want to make an investment in this new standard. And we're also, entering this new era of stormwater system planning where we're trying to bring the public and private together, as I said, and see the next generation of regional facilities. Often we think about those subdivisions that had the detention pond at the end of the street with the chain link fence around, and I think regional facilities, at least in our world, got sort of a bad name thinking about those ugly ponds that no one likes to see and no one can utilize for benefit of the neighborhood. So we're talking about a new type of regional facility, such as the one pictured on the right, which is a Glencoe School retrofit facility, one that can be a benefit to the neighborhood, can be used as an educational amenity, and is obviously providing habitat as well as system benefits, and maybe provide for both new development as well as retrofitting existing impervious area. So this is really bringing our transportation and stormwater systems together and planning for them at the same time as we're looking at our land use planning, our comprehensive plan. It's really the only way to form the kind of communities that we all really want to live in, and this is why we advocate to include stormwater in our planning efforts. We advocate green design not just because it's an aesthetic preference for some, but also because it's a functional need of our stormwater system to employ these vegetated facilities. In urban areas, stormwater facilities are integral components for each development, reducing the runoff, as you heard, the quantity, improving the quality of runoff, and they also beautify the neighborhood and the development. In areas like East Portland, the photo in the center shows, the mature trees are really a part of the character of the neighborhood, but they're also a functional element in the stormwater system, and if all of those trees were to come down, we would see huge impacts to the stormwater system from the loss of that vegetation. So there are many benefits to integrating stormwater into the design. Stormwater can be integrated into rooftops, into landscaping requirements, recreational amenities, parking refuges, even into ADA requirements. What we find in our development review is that often designers aren't aware of stormwater requirements up front early in the process or the many options that are available to them, and so it becomes an engineering add-on later in the design where it becomes a facility that is really not a benefit to anybody. It's not ideal for our system. It doesn't function as well as it could, and it certainly isn't an amenity for the development or the future residents or the neighborhood. So really integrating the stormwater earlier in the design and earlier in the process is our aim, to have it be something that is really an amenity and a part of the site. So we're looking to provide, through these planning efforts, additional guidance and in the code and in the guidelines to help people understand where they can go with stormwater and their design. So really, we do all this because planning is easier, preventing problems is easier than dealing with it later. The more we integrate stormwater management into our planning structure, the fewer problems that we as a city, we as property owners, we as developers, as ratepayers will need to pay to address in the future. Some of the challenges specifically that we face in our current code include site coverage requirements, requirements for the site coverage requirements in the code often make it difficult to fit in stormwater facilities. We end up with one need trumping another when really it would be what we want to do is look at all of the multiple needs in an urban environment and find a way to maximize the benefits. Maybe looking at rooftops or walls or other areas where we could benefit the development and also address our stormwater system needs. We are looking at updating our land use tools. The Stormwater Management Manual addresses new and redevelopment, and we're always working to provide new options and more flexibility, as well as more context-sensitive solutions to offer to developers. We're also looking at tools like limiting impervious area in some areas where there are flooding challenges or system constraints. But we also need to look at retrofitting areas that don't fall under our Stormwater Management Manual requirements, offsetting the impact of existing impervious areas, which is where our policy guidance in the comp plan really comes into play, and this is why one of the reasons it's such a high priority for us to make our policy clear there. And I'll pass it on to Marie.
Thanks. In terms of the system, we think about what happens, what the private responsibility is when we have new development. The Stormwater Management Manual handles that. There's the public system, and we're responsible for making sure that works. But then there's this area in between, this area where development's already happened, and we're working to retrofit where we can. But there are some, as Dawn and Elizabeth have been pointing out, there's some areas where we have shared responsibility or there's not currently a trigger for making improvements. So it's important that we think about the system, not just how do we deal with new development, not just how does BES pay for something, but how do all these pieces fit together in terms of beautifying our neighborhoods, retrofitting environments, and so on. The comprehensive plan addresses stormwater issues in all three aspects of the plan. So in the policies, which I'll talk a little bit about, also in the public facilities plan and in the comprehensive plan map. Currently, the comprehensive plan, the one that we've been using since 1980 with a number of amendments, but it is an old document, looks at stormwater management primarily as a utility issue. So water runs off of a property and it runs into a storm drain or into a pipe or into a stream, and then it becomes public responsibility. That's the old way of looking at stormwater. And as we talked about, that has its problems because what happens then is that we have a very expensive and difficult problem to solve where if we could limit the amount of water coming into the system in the first place or improve water quality, it would be much more cost effective. The current comprehensive plan doesn't really speak to or provide direction about how do we deal with land use issues and transportation related to stormwater management. It doesn't speak to green infrastructure at all, which is one of our key tools for dealing with stormwater, and it lacks a system perspective. So it basically says to the city, take care of stormwater, but it doesn't talk about how we do that and provide any clear direction. As Sally mentioned earlier, the comprehensive plan update that you'll see really looks at the issues throughout the comprehensive plan. And not surprisingly, there's policy direction in the watershed health and environment section. One of the, I think, important new shifts is a recognition that our natural resources, our trees, our natural infrastructure provides ecosystem services. So basically it provides for a lot of our needs. We build systems to retrofit where we can't keep our natural systems, but really the most effective way usually is to protect what we already have. So natural systems help soak up that storm water and prevent it from being a problem. The watershed health and environment section also has policies specific to the different watersheds, recognizing that we have different systems for managing stormwater and different challenges for managing stormwater in different parts of the city. So we need to think about those distinctive constellation of opportunities and challenges. Not surprisingly, the public facilities chapter talks about stormwater management, but it does bring in new direction about green infrastructure and speaks to the relationship with transportation planning as well. And then what I find particularly exciting about the comprehensive plan update is it really brings this idea of green infrastructure and the natural environment and knits it, one of my favorite analogies because I'm an avid knitter, knits it into the urban form and the urban landscape. So our urban design framework has a variety of policies that recognize the positive role that stormwater management can play, not only in providing for public needs, but also giving shape, form, and identity to our communities. Three aspects of this are these green networks that you'll hear about, the civic corridors, city greenways, and habitat corridors, which are integrated planning for active transportation, urban form, and natural resources in all different kinds of Portland neighborhoods. And then there are also policies around design with nature which talk about how do we do development in a way that recognizes and enhances the natural qualities and meets our growth management goals. So next, Dawn is going to talk about the public facilities element of comp plan implementation.
Yeah, and then we'll wrap this up and open it for questions. But I'm really excited to tell you about a new program that's within BES, and we see it as meeting our comp plan implementation responsibilities, and it's the Stormwater System Program, which I manage. And so for the first time, we're bringing together stormwater system planning, citywide infrastructure planning with the design guidelines and regulatory requirements in the manual. And we're a program that's a bridge between the engineering group in BES and the watershed scientists and specialists in BES. So we're bringing the expertise and the history and expertise from those two work groups to put forth a vision and a strategy for our stormwater system. So on this system planning side of things, we're looking at a citywide risk assessment. So we're not going to look at it watershed by watershed, but we're going to look citywide at things like at water quality and hydrology and other risks that the city faces. Then we're going to boil it or come down to the next level of a local scale and look at alternative analysis. So which direction do we want to go? There's always more than one option, and so which direction do we want to take it? And then we'll get into prioritized projects and operational changes that will rely on the community to help us prioritize. So we'll be working with PBOT and working with BPS and working with Water and Parks to prioritize our projects. So starting at the citywide scale and then coming down to the prioritized projects. On the Stormwater Management Manual side, we're always refining the policies and regulatory requirements, the development standards, and process improvement. Stormwater sometimes can really be a bit of a snag in the development process, and so we want to make sure that we're proactive about improving decision-making in that realm. So we want to be, I think that we've done this work for some time, but we're really trying to bring more discipline and more rigorous analysis to the risk assessment and the alternative analysis. And I think that this will be an important contribution and conversation to have within the comp plan implementation. Next slide. And you've heard a couple of times now how important transportation is, and I just want to emphasize, hopefully you have heard of Street by Street, but PBOT about a year ago developed a new program for residential street improvements that really respect the context of the neighborhood and really addresses some of the issues we've had with the high costs of making full street improvements. So Street by Street was a program to respond to the neighborhood and have a more local development standard for streets, which is really good for stormwater because the less impervious area you create, the less stormwater you create, and we're able to respond then with some new standards. So very important program that we're eager to support, and we're just starting conversations with the Arrow Heights community where we've done a risk analysis, and you can see the red line that's in that right-of-way shows the highest risk for our stormwater system. So we're taking transportation system planning and stormwater system planning, laying them on top of each other and working collaboratively with the community to find solutions. Another great example is the Tryon-Fano, I think it's the TGM grant. PBOT has gone after a state grant for active transportation in stormwater. We're trying to integrate pedestrian and bicycle and other transportation, public transportation needs with stormwater, really an innovative look at those two things coming together. So I really want to emphasize the relationship with transportation.
So now Sally's going to speak to the land use tools and how the connection between stormwater work that we're doing and future comp plan implementation around land use.
Actually, I was just going to touch on these very briefly. BPS does plan to participate in the stormwater system planning that Don just talked about. And our role may be to begin to explore more deeply what kinds of impervious surface limitations or what other land use tools that we could use to help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff in the city. We'll be back to talk with you a little bit more about this in the future as we scope that out, but that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. And then also in the Central City, and thanks to Michelle for chairing the Central City concept planning process, but you may recall that there's a policy in that document that asks us to expand our use of green infrastructure as a component of the overall Central City infrastructure, and there's also one related to reducing effective impervious surface. So in the Central City, this is more probably about eco-roofs and green walls and that sort of thing. So there currently is a development bonus for eco-roofs, so we'll be exploring that and looking at other ways to increase the use of that sort of thing.
Thank you, Sally.
So the last slide. So we've met the CSO challenges in the city. BES and our partners have met the CSO challenges, and we can meet these stormwater system challenges as well, but it's going to be really different. We can't solve the problem with one huge capital investment. We're not going to build 2 more big pipes here. That's not the answer. We need to work within our means and do hundreds, if not thousands, of small things that add up to a solution. And we have to rely on our partnerships and programs and small investments and one project at a time to make these differences. And so once we get our strategic plan in place, that we can then help guide and inform and share the responsibility as we move forward. So I just want to ask this commission on behalf of BES, when you hear about stormwater projects in the future, to think back to this presentation and the challenges that we face in trying to bring this together in an integrated solution. And know that we're just not coming at it from our own siloed perspective. It isn't just about a bunch of stormwater people who only care about their issue. We really see it knitted and woven into the rest of the decisions that are made in the city. And we're committed to a collaborative and coordinated approach moving forward. So thank you all very much for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Michelle?
Sort of a clarification question. So one of the slides talked about, I think it was standards for private property and public right-of-way.
Mm-hmm.
So is the expectation that if a public entity owns property but it's not right-of-way, it would be subject to the same standards as a private entity?
And really, the requirements are the same for public and private. It's just how they get implemented. So the pollution reduction requirements, the flow control requirements, the conveyance, those 3 categories, they're really the same across public and private, but the options to implement or to solve those problems are often different in the right-of-way than they are on private property.
Howard?
Thanks for the presentation. Interesting as always, and it's kind of those subtleties. Water runs downhill, so you know the direction you're dealing with. Although not always predictable. But new technology is interesting to bring into this conversation. For example, I've heard that now you can pave streets with asphalt that's
permeable. Yeah.
Permeable, right.
Yes.
So that planning streets means water is not going to go running off, it's going to running down. I'm curious to know who gets involved in that, Bureau of Transportation, or how do you guys interact around new technology like that?
Well, it's a great question. Pervious pavement has been around for a while, and in some communities, it's the answer to the stormwater problems. I know in North Carolina and other East Coast communities, pervious pavement has played a big role in solving their stormwater problems. In Portland, where we have bureaus with Transportation Authority and Responsibility and then stormwater, pervious pavement falls between or is a shared responsibility. So we have several pilot projects that we've implemented over the years but it hasn't become a full-blown strategy because we're still resolving the maintenance responsibilities. It's a street and it's a stormwater facility, and so we need to come to agreement on shared maintenance responsibilities. But it offers a lot of promise.
What's happening now in the meantime? And when you pave a street with permeable water,
Well, there are, I think, 4 or maybe 5 examples now, and I think currently we're sharing the responsibility. Each one has different responsibilities. They may have to be power washed. They may need to be swept. They have special needs that the city has not completely tooled up to respond to. So we have these pilot projects now that we're monitoring to assess what the maintenance requirements are.
And on the private side, we find more and more developers utilizing pervious pavement in parking lots and private streets and driveways. And there was a lot of interest before the industry was really ramped up in Portland to provide it. But I think that we're seeing a lot more applications for it. I think the costs are coming down on the private side and the availability is out there. So I think it's just a matter of time before we manage it in the right of way.
And one of the other things I want to point out is that stormwater management is not a one-size-fits-all kind of endeavor. That really, even in different areas, if the water was just falling on the ground pre-development, how that water interacts with that area is going to differ in different parts of the city. So some places the water falls on the ground and it soaks up, and we don't have an issue. So but in places like the East Buttes along Johnson Creek watershed, in the Johnson Creek watershed and much of Southwest, even when the trees and native vegetation are intact, we still see a fair amount of runoff. And as more development happens, we have more and more challenges. So sometimes when we're looking at infiltration strategies, which really are our preference, we may have difficulty doing that because the natural conditions, first of all, present a challenge. And so we need to really think about what is the landscape that we're beginning with, and then how does development interact with that landscape, and then how do we manage stormwater most appropriately given those conditions.
So pervious pavement is not likely the solution in Southwest, but it could be in big ways on the east side.
I also want to point out, just in case you didn't know this, that parts of the central city, we have stormwater running off our roads, going into pipes and going directly into the Willamette River. So I think a lot of people think that we've heard so much about the combined system and how important it is to keep water out of the combined system so that we take good care of that investment and we don't have discharge of sewage into the Willamette. But we do have discharge of stormwater directly into the Willamette off some impervious areas. So even in the most developed areas, we think we've managed it in an engineered way when in fact it isn't always the case.
Catherine?
Try to figure out the best way to ask this question, but this is related to STCs and then the stormwater management practices or manual requirements for new development. And is there perhaps a clear correlation, or has there been a study done with the more requirements that have been put on development to treat stormwater on site, and whether STC fees have stayed the same in relation to the higher costs that development's now facing, or are they not correlated at all? And I guess where I'm going with this is trying to make an argument for a developer that yes, you're now doing more of these things on site and paying for them directly, but your STC fees haven't gone up recently because we haven't had to put as much into infrastructure, or is there no clear correlation there at all?
That's a really good question, and I think our stormwater SDCs are very low, and we have not gone back to look at that correlation in a really long time. So there are multiple components to the stormwater SDC, and a number of those components relate to the public right-of-way and usage of the street. So it's a shared cost borne by all developments, regardless of what happens on the site itself. But I think that you're absolutely correct in that we need to go back and take another look at those SDCs in light of our current regulations and see what the appropriate charges are. Likely they would increase if we went back and looked, because they have not increased in so long.
Well, what might be interesting is you're looking at that and going back to your central city planning and looking at more ways such as eco roofs to implement them. I get a lot of pushback on developers with the added cost that's burdening their project and therefore not wanting to do it. And there's other less expensive ways to do it. But perhaps if there was a look at do what you were going to do anyway, but do this in addition, so you're doing that much more maybe, or I don't know, a way to look at it, and therefore you can get a reduction in SDC fees. Perhaps you'd get more people to kind of volunteering to do it anyway. The carrot, more of a carrot versus just right now you kind of get a development bonus perhaps that they wouldn't do anyway because they don't need it.
Right.
Yeah, so just something else to look at.
No, that's a great idea. And that's why we're always trying to look at ways we can overlap requirements with other requirements as well, landscaping requirements and other things that the city wants to implement on site anyway, so that stormwater isn't an add-on, a tack-on after the fact that just ends up costing more, but is something that can help you meet other requirements as well. So that's a good point. Thank you.
So I have a question that kind of that piggybacks onto that, and my questions are kind of basic, but anyway, in making sure that there's a system for the people that are developing property, and you mentioned in your presentation, you don't want people to make plans to develop a property like in a school district, and then have to face what it's going to cost to abate the stormwater. And is there something within your process when people are applying for permits that requires them to understand before they even get a permit that there is going to be something that they're going to have to do with stormwater abatement, so that it's wrapped up in your policy and in your procedure, that nobody can kind of miss that fact and the fact that it costs so much?
It is a component of our permit process, but that's such a fast track for so many folks that we find that's not quite soon enough to let people know. Once they step in the door with their plans completed, ready to get their permit, it's often too late.
So yes, that's what I'm getting at, is that
earlier outreach.
Yeah, because as, for example, we're building a $43 million middle school, and we're working with professionals, they understand, this. We ended up buying a third of an acre from one of the farmers, which caused its own stir. But it's ending up being this, what I call a pool with trees. And it's just this huge detention pond in the front of the building. It's not very pretty. And it's perfectly useless as an educational tool. It just ended up that way. And it cost a fortune that came out of the project. So I don't know where along the lines of our planning that we kind of went south on it, but I'm just wondering for other people's sake, before they actually get to the point that they're permitting, people have to be aware of this cost and how, I saw the way that you like to design it. It can be quite pretty, and I've seen it turn out nicer. I'm just saying it would be kind of nice if early on everybody kind of knew this is a requirement.
BES has long had a group in the Bureau that does educational outreach, primarily to school children, and we've also had a program that partnered with churches and schools, but primarily look at retrofits. So I think we do need to improve our outreach to the development community, to engineering firms, and engineers are often the ones doing the stormwater design, which can work out really well, but I think our goal would be to get to the design professionals that are working earlier in the process, so that it's not just a functional exercise, but merging the aesthetics with the functional component that happens later in the design.
Well, especially on a CMGC project where they're working with you as you're designing it. It's not the design build, it's a very different way of going about it. Just seems like that would be a good thing. And my second question was just about partnerships. You mentioned something about partnering with PBOT, but there's also ODOT. And so you guys all own these different swaths of property that connect to each other. And so as you're developing these systems of stormwater abatement and management, how does that approach to systemization of stormwater management when you have different agencies owning different properties?
Yeah, it's complicated. It's very complicated, and ODOT just recently, I think, has come to terms with what their responsibilities statewide for stormwater are. They had a lawsuit a couple of years ago, and they had some grant money they distributed throughout the state. So they're still in the process of getting their MS4 permit. So they're looking obviously statewide. They have a number of other drivers, and we've acknowledged that we have overlapping interests. And so PBOT and ODOT are definitely key partners, but it's just the beginning of the conversation with ODOT. We have looked at some joint projects that we could get to know each other with. I mean, perhaps build something and learn about our institutions that way. But the system planning piece has not yet, we've not yet overlapped, but we've met with them, we've expressed our interest, and we look forward to building that relationship. So it's early in the
You
conversation.
wouldn't be thinking of a statewide system where no matter what agency you are, you have a certain guideline?
Yeah.
Like a criteria so that it doesn't matter who you are?
Yeah, I think from ODOT's perspective, it would be great if they had that, and I hope that they work in that direction.
And to be fairly blunt about it, we do have a challenge with the ODOT facility. So we have freeways right now that stormwater is discharging directly from the freeways into our streams, and that's a big problem.
And it was created before the regulations were in
Right,
place. So.
right. So there's no blame. I mean, these situations are, our knowledge is evolving, and when I say we, all of our knowledge is evolving, right? So we inherited these situations, and we're doing our best to make it better, and it is getting better. But there was an old thought that stormwater was a problem, and the main way of dealing with it is just to get rid of it. And it was sort of an out of sight, out of mind perspective. But that out of sight, out of mind perspective created a lot of problems. So, property owners who had landslides because somebody uphill of them discharged their stormwater improperly. On Terwilliger, remember, we had serious landslides where homes were damaged and even lost because stormwater was managed improperly. There is a project coming up on off of Barber Boulevard on Southwest 26th Avenue where BES and ODOT are working together to manage some of the stormwater, and it'll create quite a lovely facility right between those two facilities between Barber and I-205. So there'll be lots of native planting, it'll be managing stormwater, and it will be an enhancement. So we're looking towards seeing more projects like that.
Other questions? I have a question. As you talked about evaluating, as you go forward and evaluating risk and kind of looking from citywide down to a project, how do you incorporate equity into that process?
So BES has a strategic plan that has levels of service, and all of our risk assessment is organized around those levels of service, and equity is one of our levels of service. We are just beginning through the analysis to identify what we call the likelihood and consequence of failure around these levels of service. So we have to map out where equity failures are occurring and quantify that. So it's in the work plan, but the work has not been done, I guess is the short answer.
And I could address it in another way. I work on the Johnson Creek watershed team, and since 2001, we've had a watershed-wide plan that's been addressing nuisance flooding, which is flooding that happens about every 10 years or more frequently. In some parts of Johnson Creek, the creek floods every other year. And when I say it floods roads and private property every other year. So we have this plan that mitigates a nuisance flood, improves water quality, improves habitat. As it so happens, and I don't know that if we intentionally, I wasn't around in 2001, I don't know if we intentionally were addressing equity or not, but the floodplain, we're seeing some of the folks who are most affected by flooding are folks who don't have as many choices about where they're going to live. And so they end up in these places that are floodplain, poorly draining. We often see problems with mold in their houses. So many of the stormwater consequences that people experience, they experience as individuals, and we may not be aware of that. And so by working to reduce flooding, we're actually improving equity conditions for those communities. It doesn't solve the problem completely, but it does make it better.
Okay. I was just thinking, as you think about street improvements and, where that happens, that a lot of East County is at risk in terms of just low income and minority population. So to think about it in terms of an investment strategy, along with your risk, may be an opportunity to think about. I know you're thinking about capital improvement projects and local improvement districts, but if you're going into low income areas, a dollar is still very important, and you're talking about how, making some strategic choices for them about their basic needs versus additional funds. And
no, it's a really important, and the map that I showed of Arrow Heights had a risk assessment for the conveyance and the road improvements. Equity should be or will be another layer in that assessment. We just haven't done that work yet. So it's not, we've agreed that we will include that in our analysis. So it just becomes another layer of the assessment to the total risk.
Okay.
And I think that the policy guidance in the urban design framework that you'll see talks to this concept. And I can't remember the current name, but city greenways or neighborhood greenways. But part of that concept was to think about neighborhood streets where we want active transportation and how do we integrate all our system needs and prioritize where do we start. So we have a design that responds to the character of the neighborhood, that meets needs in these places where we have substandard or unimproved streets, and it isn't cost prohibitive. And so we would look forward to an opportunity to work with planning and transportation to think about where do our needs overlap and how can we better help community members get their day-to-day needs met in terms of transportation while we're also managing our stormwater.
And along with that, you touched on it, was the issue of health. And so part of our Portland plan, one of our criteria is health. And so the ability of residents to have essentially a good hard street and the water's taken away and not have health problems associated with standing water or whatever, hopefully that's part of your assessment.
Absolutely. Another side benefit from, we talked mostly about our built systems, and the terminology is, our language isn't completely up to date with what our practice is, but we talked more about like green streets and eco roofs and infiltration planters and those kinds of things. But another aspect of our stormwater management system are the streams and the restored floodplains and the natural areas that we acquire, and those have health benefits as well. So as we think about climate change, there's temperature mitigation that we get from that. There's air purification, air quality that's associated with our green infrastructure. And there's also opportunities for recreation. So in Johnson Creek, and this happens in other watersheds as well, where we do restoration projects to help manage stormwater and to increase habitat, we're actually increasing the number of natural areas where people can go and walk and rest and have a respite from the rest of their life. So I'm not sure that's exactly where you're going, but I just wanted to highlight that for you as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Other questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good presentation. Yeah. Next, we have the comp plan update. Marty Stockton.
This is beautiful. Yeah.
Marty? Ready?
Go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I want you to go ahead.
So, good afternoon. Today I just wanted to just present before you what we heard from the public report for the working draft part 2 of the comprehensive plan. This report was specifically for the time frame of October through the end of December, so December 31st of last year, 2013. I do want to refresh and kind of remind folks that This is the second report that is being presented before you. It was about I would say late spring of last year that I presented the working draft part 1, what we heard report. There have also been 2 other reports, one on the summer outreach and one on the spring district mapping conversations that have been briefed and shared with the Community Involvement Committee. And it's our intention that prior to the July public release of the proposed plan, of the comprehensive plan, that we would bring actually all 4 reports back in front of you and give you a bit of an overview of the full public involvement process leading up to the proposed plan. So I wanted to talk a bit about the process and the tools within the Part 2 public outreach. So again, October through December of last year. One thing that was so incredibly unique about this particular public involvement phase was the online map app tool. And I know that we have shared the online map app tool with you at a few meetings. And this was really just a phenomenal way for the Bureau to share all the sheer amount of data as well as concepts that we're working with the public, and allow the public to really, get some basic high-level information or dive very deep in getting some very detailed technical information. And then, of course, the unique opportunity to provide public comment on the map app, as well as view other public comments. And there were actually a few situations where folks were actually commenting on other people's comments, and so that was a really neat aspect of the tool. So with the map app and going into the public involvement phase, we did kind of a public involvement process that was a little different than previous efforts, in that we didn't have the big round of public workshops. The idea is that because of the tool and the sheer amount of information that was on the tool, we really needed to focus on a bit more of kind of the training on how to use the tool. So really, I would say kind of the first approach to getting information out to the public and having the public kind of play with the information was that we did meet with over 94 organizations during that 3-month time frame, and a good portion of those meetings did involve training on the map app. Because not everyone is affiliated with an organization, we knew that we would have to definitely host some events and publicize broadly those events. And so we did hold 3 info sessions on this particular phase. And one of the info sessions, Park Rose so graciously hosted. So thank you. Additionally, we had 3 district mapping sessions. And we were a bit strategic about where we held these district mapping conversations. And simply it was that we wanted to really target some geographic areas where we had some specific questions for the public. And so we held these in North Portland, in East Portland, and Southwest Portland. And these were kind of smaller events, and it was just a really wonderful way for us to get some information on some specific questions that we had about those geographies. So again, the results in relation to the map app is that we received over 900 comments through the map app, which, just to give you a little bit of perspective on some previous phases, that is 3 times as many public comments that we had received in the Part 1 working draft. So just there was a sheer amount of volume that was generated with the online tool. We also received a little over 200 letters, emails, etc., and then staff summaries at the various events that we went to. As far as the comments and kind of the processing, So we started processing the 1,100 comments really back in December to just kind of get a head start. And for us, you really have to appreciate that there's probably about 12 to 15 authors on this report. And I think one thing that was really important to us is that when we put the comments in the database and started kind of grouping them, it was really important for not only comp plan team staff that are connected with a particular topic to really kind of go through the comments and kind of do the synthesis, but also, for example, our district liaison program, who, each of the staff are tied to a geography, that they look at the comments based on a geographic kind of way of breaking down the comments. So what we have done with this report is, with the 1,100 comments, we have grouped them into topic summaries. And so if a particular member of the public is more interested in historic preservation or the demolition issue, which is probably one of the hottest land use issues right now, then they can go and look that up based on the topic. The district summaries is by geography, and the event summaries, if someone attended a larger event, then they could go and they could read the summary on that particular event as far as what the public shared with staff at those events. One thing I would like to share is that we did provide this draft, an earlier draft, to the Community Involvement Committee in February, and I just wanted to share some feedback that we received from the CIC. The CIC appreciated the 3 different ways that we grouped the comments. They felt like that was a really positive way to, for a reader to really access what is most important to them or of most interest. And then the CIC was particularly interested in the outreach conducted for East Portland. And so I just would like to share that of the 94 community groups that we met with, that for the groups that have a geographic nature, 20% were specifically with East Portland groups. So that's pretty good. One thing, too, is that many of the groups that we met with don't have a particular geographic tie. It may be that they are an interest-based group or a non-geographic or a community-based group, et cetera, or a community of color. And 32% of the groups that we met with fell into a category that did not have a geographic connection. So wanted to highlight that. One thing that we have done with previous public involvement efforts is that there's a new best practice, and that's really tracking the demographics of the community members that we are engaging with and that are participating. And with previous efforts that rely more on kind of the large public events, we've done a pretty good job of getting demographic data. It's probably about 40%. With this, because that was not the focus of this particular engagement, we only received kind of 40 demographic kind of responses or surveys. And so while the income breakdown with those participants was pretty diverse, the racial and ethnic diversity was not. So that's something to highlight. Additionally, because over 900 events came through the Map App tool, it's just a good reminder that our technology needs to also capture a best practice of tracking demographics. And so that's something that we kind of knew going in, but it was just so definitely highlighted with the results that it would be such an amazing opportunity to have had the demographics through the Map App. So kind of a note for next time. As far as next steps, staff is taking this information as well as the other What We Heard reports and then other information, and working on the proposed plan. So we're kind of in this quiet phase with public involvement, although we are doing some kind of early consultation or check-ins when we do have a proposed land use change that is going to affect community members, because really our ultimate goal is that when we come out with a proposed plan in July, the goal is to have no surprises. So there are some kind of early consultation that's occurring right now. Oftentimes what folks ask with these types of reports is, wow, this is really great information, so what are you going to do about it? And our response is that the proposed plan is our kind of official, how we've taken that information, but we are going to be accompanying the proposed plan are going to be these summaries of change memos that staff will write based on either their chapter, if it's a chapter in the comprehensive plan, or some of the other components like the urban design framework or the citywide systems plan. So we definitely are wanting to kind of close the feedback loop as far as this is what we heard, and then this is our proposal, and this is the rationale behind these changes. And so just being very transparent about that. And I think that's it for my report. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Questions people have?
I have to ask a question. I already announced, Marty, that we have new members on the CIC that are fully seated and active. This is what we heard is the title of this report. And the question is, did we hear from enough people deeply in all of the topics we're probing here to feel confident this really is representative? Just to go one step further, we all know that in any issue, the more vocal people show up and are heard. But do you feel, or are you comfortable that this represents a pretty good comprehensive view of who we wanted to talk to get the information about what we heard? And to go a little deeper with the question, there are sister organizations such as the Office of Neighborhood Association and so forth that could and should, PDC as well, cooperate with us in gathering this data, and I'm wondering if you were able to incorporate them in this report.
Well, to answer your first question, Howard, I am never truly satisfied with who we're not hearing from. And so I think it's good for us to document kind of the process and who was engaged, and then always try to do better. And so for me, especially as we're moving into the proposed plan, I see some real opportunities to do kind of a deeper engagement of our communities of color or other groups that are not traditionally or have been underrepresented in the past. And so, right now we're trying to figure out kind of a process or an approach to do that. So, again, this is a documentation of what happened. We can always do better. As far as answering your question about the Office of Neighborhood Involvement and Portland Development Commission as our partners, both the office and PDC have been very involved in the comprehensive plan. I know that it's been more on the staff-to-staff level. The Office of Neighborhood Involvement has been deeply invested in the community involvement chapter, which is chapter 1. As far as their involvement in the outreach, I know that they do a good job of promoting our activities just like we try to promote theirs. But if there's kind of a more specific question you have, just let me know and I try to.
No, just want to know if you probed all the resources available and got them on board.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Karen, and then Chris.
So I just want to say that I'm really glad that you're tracking demographics, and I just commend you so much for doing that. And I think if you did get 900 app comments, it's a brilliant way to collect 900 pieces of demographic data, owing to the fact that a lot of people in poverty do not have access to computers. So I think we just need to keep that in mind. But once again, in looking at the demographics that are listed in the handout, You've got the over 55 crowd that votes a lot. They don't maybe represent the same percentage in the city, but they certainly were at the event. The income levels are 35,000 to 100,000, so you've got people of means. You've got people owning homes, people who drove themselves, and people who speak English, and people who are white. And so the same people are showing up to the same meetings all over the city. And I think it's all of our challenge. I am not saying anything about the city, because I have the same problem in Park Rose, is how in the world do we get our hands, arms, legs, hearts around the fact that we are not having representative meetings or input from the people we serve. We just are not. It's the loudest, whitest, richest voices at every meeting. And I just wonder how we change that. So mine is much more rhetorical, except to thank you for collecting that information.
Chris?
Well, I recognize that we have a long way to go, but I do want to take a minute and celebrate that obviously the MAP app has been transformative in the way we get input, and I want to, again, congratulate the team that put that together. So good work.
Excellent.
Hey, go ahead.
I just would say, if you're going to modify the MAP app to collect that sort of information in the future, I'd be conscious of including an explanation of why you're asking for the information in the document, just because other organizations I've worked with that have tried to collect that information have gotten a lot better results when they explain to people why they're being asked. If you just say, check a box, a lot of people will respond to that with, well, I don't want to be put in a box. And so if you explain to them why you're asking, you get a better response rate.
Thank you. That's great.
Just as a final comment, I just want to say that the gathering of this data was accomplished significantly by some members of the CIC that cooperated in getting workshops and so forth together. So a lot of this is the work the committee helped put together. I want to acknowledge that.
We're very appreciative of the volunteer work that goes into the Community Involvement Committee.
Great group of people.
I want to just take and say, I think this work is very informative. It lays out to me some of the tension in the city about the fear of change coming to neighborhoods, the fear they see, or some of the things they see, and then the desire for a better neighborhood when you look at the other side of the comment in the same context of, we want development, we want prosperity, how do we get that? But at the same time, we don't want what we just saw. We don't want that building, we don't want that house torn down. We don't want people parking in front of my house, but we also want that new store or new whatever to be in my neighborhood, and I want it to have good design. And so I guess the tension there is within the neighborhood. I think our challenge is really, I think what Karen has said about how do we get a more diverse conversation really around maybe from renters and people of that nature, and also how do we come forward with solutions? I mean, because those are, I mean, how do we get the prosperity that is clearly desired by the city and give them some tools to change? Other comments, questions? Good work. Very good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a briefing on Interpal Outer Division Project. Joe, are you the presenter? Alex. It's Alex? Alex.
So Radcliffe, Jack and I, and me, I'm Alex Howard, will be presenting today.
Okay.
Okay. Just thought he would share the fame with some other people.
Share the fame.
So we're just going to load up. We have a little photo presentation. We're going to take you on a little visual tour. So we want to get that on the computer for you. It's exciting. Okay. So as I mentioned, my name is Alex Howard. I work for BPS, and
I'm Radcliffe Dackney. I also work for BPS.
And we are here to introduce you to the PAL Division Transit and Development Project. And I have to say, I'm really excited about it because I think it's a great project that's going to bring wonderful transit service to an area that really needs it. So I'm pretty excited to be here to talk to you guys about it and to get it started. But before, I just wanted to highlight that this is a regional project, and we have some regional partners in the room. So we have Brian Momberg and John Williams from Metro who are here, also working on this project. Brian is the overall project manager for it. And then we have April Bertelson from PBOT, who's working on transportation, and John Gillum, also working with VPS on transportation issues. So we're all working together on this project as part of a really collaborative initiative. So today, what we want to do, like I said, is introduce you to it. So we'll go over the project outcomes, what we hope to achieve with this project, why we're planning in this corridor for enhanced transit, our organizational structure. As you just got a taste, there are a lot of players in this project. And then we'll go over a little bit about our work plan for the next year, what we expect to be doing on the Bureau side. And after we go through that information, we'll do the visual tour. We can bring up some photos. We can look at the aerials so you can see a bit about what's out there. Always find that's helpful. So I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to wait and I'll give you guys some materials in a minute. The core aim of this project is, I think, pretty simple. It's to improve public transportation options in the Powell Division corridor. So that's looking at Powell Division from, well, the central city getting across, all the way down these corridors out to Gresham. So we're looking at, within that corridor, how can we improve transit service? And specifically, we're looking at picking a high-capacity transit route within that corridor, so figuring out what the route alignment will be. Will it go down Inner Powell and Outer Division? Will it go all the way down one street or all the way down the other? That's a big part of our project here. We'll be looking at station areas, and we'll also be looking at where we have major nodes. So what areas do we really want to serve? What do we want to make sure, who do we want to make sure can get on this line, and where do they need to go? So those are our big pieces. Within that, we'll be looking at land use visions for those major nodes, and that's maybe the core part of our project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. A timeline. This is a fast-moving project. Right now, we just started the planning phase, and we expect to have about a year to finish this from today. So this is picking the alignment, picking the station areas. We want to get into design after that, so probably 2 years in design, 2015 to 2017, with the goal to start construction in 2018 for operation around 2020. And if we have more questions about the timeline, so we can pick Brian's brain about it, but what we're looking for is a near-term high-capacity transit solution for the Powell Division area. So let's see. Like I mentioned, I think it's a really great project, and I'm really excited about it because this is a really high transit use corridor. The number 9 and the number 4 bus lines are two of the most heavily used lines in the corridor. And so what we're looking to do is make those trips along that corridor faster, more efficient, more pleasant, more reliable. I think it's something like over 17,000 people get on and off those buses every day. And that's not even looking at the crossings with the 75 line on Cesar Chavez or looking at the line 72 on 82nd. So there's a ton of people who use this and a ton of destinations. This corridor was also identified in regional plans, so there's some precedent for it. It's in the Regional Transportation Plan, the Regional High Capacity Transit Plan, and then it's also in the East Metro Connections. So I think there's probably some broad support for this after all this planning work. So a little bit more about the organization maybe. So because we're serving such a big area and because this involves TriMet and other agencies, this is a regional project, and Metro is the lead agency. So they are overseeing the major transportation alignment, they're doing the major public engagement, they're doing the Title VI analysis. But at the same time, we want to make sure that this meets local needs. So the cities of Portland and Gresham applied for a CET grant to conduct local planning for this project, which we were awarded. So we are leading, as the cities, the node identification and the land use and development strategies for those major nodes in the corridor. So that's going to be the focus of our work. Who do we need to serve? How does this connect to the comprehensive plan? Are we serving the areas where we're looking to grow? And so how do we make more complete neighborhoods in addition to this high-capacity transit planning piece? Like I said, it's a year-long project, and we're just getting started, but we recently completed 2 background documents, an existing conditions report, and an opportunities and constraints map analysis. Those will be up on the Metro site today, so we will make sure to send links to you so you can access all those materials and start to get acquainted with some of the issues that we found. And we'll talk through some of those as we go through the tour. So as we move forward into the spring, there are a couple key tasks that we're going to be looking to do. We're going to be defining what a node means for us, and we're going to be setting up some screening criteria so we can start to rank our nodes in terms of major ones and smaller ones so that we can come up with an analysis to see what's going on. We're also going to introduce this project to the community. So we're going to start going to some open houses. We're going to join 2 upcoming PBOT open houses, one this Thursday, actually the Division Neighborhood Streets Plan, and then we're going to go to, that's on Thursday the 13th, and then we'll be going to another one next Monday, St. Patrick's Day, at Cleveland High School on the 20 Spikeway. And then we'll be looking for some other engagement opportunities as we move into the spring where we can notice a little bit more broadly and make sure people, we can engage more Portlanders in the process. So this spring is going to be introducing the project, coming up with those screening criteria so we can have a nice clear methodology for how we make decisions, both for the nodes and for the alignment, and then also doing some additional background research. So we'll be doing some economic assessments, and we'll be working with Tyler Bump at BPS to do an economic corridor assessment and then also look at transportation access to work in the corridor so we can get sort of a deeper dive into some of the needs. As we move through the summer, what we'll be doing is taking our screening criteria and putting it to work. So we'll be looking at alignments, looking at the nodes, and narrowing down the pieces so that in the fall we can come out with a proposal and we can go to public workshops, talk to the public, test our ideas, and come up with a final plan or proposed plan by the end of 2014, early 2015. And then that will go through a public process led by Metro. So that would go to our steering committee, which Metro has convened, as well as to you guys, and later to the city council. It's kind of a quick nutshell of our process, and I'd be happy to write up this information and share it with you if you wanted it in more detail. So those are sort of the overview of the project. I mean, the main idea is to really figure out how on Powell Division we can substantially improve transit access, reliability, and service, and where are those key points along the line where we want to support development, provide better access to services, figure out those key connections to get people to that line, and really, push forward that healthy connected neighborhoods work we started with the Portland plan and we're pushing through with the comp plan. So I think with that, we should get to know it.
Do you want to hand these out before we do the virtual tour?
So we have part of a larger handout produced by Metro. I'll give these to Julie to pass around to you guys. That'll orient you to the corridor, and this should get you started. Like I said, we just finished our opportunity constraints and existing conditions, so we'll have that up where we can post it next week, guys.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So what's the goal of the economic corridor analysis?
We want to look at market conditions along the corridor, come up with some typologies of different segments along the corridor so that it can inform where we might want to put some major nodes and look at some redevelopment opportunities. It'll be the basis for later real estate analysis of the nodes themselves. What has potential impact? Who can we, what are the households along them? What services are we missing?
So the convener is Metro in all this, right?
Convener is Metro in this.
Okay.
But the city has a specific responsibility.
I know.
But yes, we only have we are not in charge of it.
So you're working with ODOT as well?
ODOT as well. Project partners, like I said, are Metro, the cities of Portland and Gresham, ODOT, Multnomah County, and TriMet.
And TriMet.
And TriMet, of course.
Okay.
They have to get it moving.
So Alex, my understanding is the stakeholder committee, the steering committee for this is composed a little differently.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it's the elected officials from each jurisdiction.
Yes, thank you for
I understand it has a much broader community representation this time around. What's the goal for that and the expected outcome from that?
Well, thank you for bringing it up. That's an important point that I meant to mention, that the steering committee includes both elected officials and community members, so it's a wide range of people on it. So the chairs are Councilors Craddock and Stacy from Metro. It also includes, for us, Commissioner Novick is our representative, representatives from the city of Gresham, but also Jessica Howard, the president of PCC, Nicole Johnson, who's from Opal, so environmental justice transit advocate. It includes Fred Meyer. It includes Rahi Reddy from Apano, who is also part of the J District work. So it's a pretty wide range, and I think the idea is, and Brian can speak more to this if I don't quite hit on it, is to make sure that the decision makers are also hearing what community members want in that official forum, that they're encountering it, talking about it, and they can come to, I believe we're working towards at the first steering committee meeting, which is coming up on the 17th, a process for decision making and how the committee will function. So there's some information that's forthcoming about it. But it's to bring the community voices straight to the table.
Do you have the list? Yes.
We have a list online, and I can
There's
produce
community
lists,
members
yes.
on the, there are community members on the list.
There are community members on the list.
A ton of them, I'm sure.
So Catholic Charities is on it. Jim Bilto from the Gresham Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. We have a member from the Division Midway Alliance, Lori Boyson. We have Devin Carr, who's a student and transit writer. We have Matt Clark from the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. Bill Crawford from Southeast Uplift. Elected Shemaya, I can't say her name right, Fagan from the Oregon State Legislature. Heidi Gennon from Upstreet Public Health. Like I said, Nicole Johnson from Opal. Kem Marks from the East Portland Neighborhood Office and the East Portland Action Plan. Other community members we have, and then Rahi Reddy, as I mentioned, and then Matt Wan from the East Metro Economic Alliance. So those are some of the community members in addition to the elected officials from Gresham, Portland, Metro, et cetera.
Okay.
So it's a pretty good mix.
Yeah.
I think they did a really good job with that.
I was looking for other diverse groups, so I'm sure they're there.
If you have any questions.
Well, it's such a diverse piece of geography you're talking about here.
Absolutely.
I mean, the demographics are fascinating, actually.
They really are very interesting. So we tried to make sure that there are people from the east side, that there are organizations from sort of closer to the west end, like Catholic Charities, which has a lot of development down around 26th and Powell. So we tried to cover geography as well as different communities. So like I said, I'd be happy to write up this information and email it to you and then include the
I think it'd be good if you could
steering committee
get it to
members.
Julie, and Julie could get it out
Absolutely.
to us. Great.
That'd be good to see the
Thanks.
list of who's there.
So let's do the virtual tour, and then we'll come back and hit them with all our questions.
Do you have to put on my virtual shoes or
You just have to
stay comfortable? Yeah.
Stay
Lean
comfortable.
in. Lean in. I'm going to lean in.
I'm leaning in, Howard.
I'm leaning
You
in.
can't notice.
I feel it. I feel Powell. Powell is coming to me.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation. The comment about this geography is quite diverse is a really good segue into this virtual tour. You have this map, and it shows you that we are going, the study area stretches from downtown Portland, Central City Portland, all the way to Gresham. But the Portland piece, we are looking or focusing on the area within the city boundary, and particularly from the east bank of the river all the way to 174th. And this virtual tour is basically a set of photos that gives you a sense of what we have to work with in this diverse geography. So from the downtown area, Central City Portland, making connections into the different parts of the corridor, the J District on Division near 82nd, PCC also at Division and 82nd Avenue, Powell at Cesar Chavez, Division at 122nd, an emerging center, Powell at 112th, Powell at 122nd. And then just a place where buses and cars can coexist on this corridor. But we're going to start with crossing over the Ross Island Bridge into the Powell, Milwaukee area. So this is looking at the inner Powell section of the corridor. Powell near 21st, and on the snow day you can kind of see even a little bit better where the roadway is being used. Powell at 28th, you've got Catholic Charities there. The roadway is 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane. Again, this is Powell Boulevard, and it's a state highway here. Up in the Powell at 50th and above, you've got some rights of way that are used for parking, but still 2 lanes and some center median. This is looking west in that same area near 60th. And some properties that are larger and commercial uses, 1-story uses. And then as you go beyond east of 205, Powell becomes more of a two-lane highway and fewer sidewalks and less urban, more of a rural feel. Powell at 110th. Here you've got some bike lanes. And Powell in the 140s and more of a residential feel. So we'd go out to 140 and turn up 174th and we'll come back down Division. Here Division in the 150s. You've got 2 travel lanes, each direction, a center lane, a bike lane, and parking. And the land uses here are quite mixed. You've got sometimes single-family homes, businesses, and newer multifamily residential on the street, but still a very wide road. And here in the 130s, you've even got a pedestrian overpass to avoid crossing in the traffic. Division in the 120s and 30s looking east. You've got some single-family homes there on the left and then some newer multifamily on the right. Posted speed limit is 35 and curb-tight sidewalks. And this is as you're approaching 122nd Avenue. You've got a little bit more commercial, lower story commercial, 1- and 2-story at most. In the teens, Division in the 110s, you've got some public storage. Again, a mix of different kinds of commercial, mostly auto-oriented, but you've got, again, a wide right-of-way, 2 travel lanes, a center turn lane, bike lanes, and room for parking at the edge. And here, too, you've got a mix of development. You've got some newer development right up against some older single-family or type buildings. Approaching 182nd in the J District, still pretty wide street. And here you've got PCC just to the right on the other side of 82nd Avenue. On the west end of 82nd, as you move towards downtown, this is just east of 60th. Division has been redesigned, and you've got 1 travel lane in each direction, a center turn lane, and a bike lane. And then as you move in closer in, inner division, you've got you'll start seeing a lot more infill development of 3/1, 4/1 buildings. And this is near 50th. And here, narrow 2 lanes, and you've got some new development. It used to be the Fox Fence Company on the left. A new building is going up. And the buildings on the right are relatively recent as well, built within the last 10 or so years. And then as you move into inner division even more, at 34th, you've got newer development. And 2 lanes in each direction, no turn lane, no center turn lanes, and parking on the edge. And more examples of construction in inner division. This is at 26th End Division. Local transit serves this street very well. And then Division at 21st, an example of single-family homes near the street and commercial development, new seasons there. And then, again, connecting back to the city, this whole project is about making connections to these different places and potential nodes. And with high-capacity transit, making these better connections, not just for the inner part of Portland, but those other nodes that I mentioned out on 82nd Avenue, J District, and in East Portland.
So you see, our key challenge, you look at the roads and you can see there's varying right-of-way widths, but there's also varying levels of development. So in some of the inner areas, like inner division, we have a ton of development and a ton of uses, but we have a very narrow right-of-way. And then you see on Powell, it's only a half a mile to the south, we have a much wider street. So what we're going to be trying to figure out through this process is what is the optimal place to put this transit? How can it function most effectively, but how can we also, develop and put in transit stations that work really well given existing development conditions and other improvements that we've made in the streets. So those are the issues we'll be weighing as we're looking at the alignment, and that's where the screening criteria is going to come into play. So in the spring, as we develop this criteria, we're going to be looking at all these different factors to come up with our sort of optimal solution as we go down the corridor.
Questions? People have questions?
Yes, it's really more of a concern. It's more of a concern because as you see things develop and move towards solutions, one hopes they aren't just transportation oriented around wheels, but are very sensitive in certain parts of these communities for how human beings need to interact. So interdivision is kind of a people street situation. Outer division is a let's get home kind of experience. How do we balance those two, which I put in the hands of you experts, to figure out that we make it community, however you want to characterize community, and build equity? And what I mean by equity is leaving people a community they can still walk around in and not turn into a transportation solution.
Yes, that is the key challenge. And so over the springtime, as we start to put together the screening criteria, we're going to figure out how we can make those decisions effectively. So I don't have a great answer for you right now, but that's absolutely a concern. And that is one of the reasons that Portland was awarded the grant. So we could look at the land use component and how people use the area, how we expect it to develop, and sort of like what we're, thinking about our healthy connected neighborhood strategy and how we can make, expand that to areas that don't have it while still providing, a better transit service option. So that's the core issue, I think, with this. And so over the springtime, we're going to be working through to develop a methodology for making smart decisions about that, hopefully.
All right. Chris?
So I'm going to ask you to kind of put this in context of sort of all the transit pieces that potentially impact the comp plan. So, obviously we have Southwest Corridor that's on its own track, which, I might slightly uncharitably describe as plotting. They're plotting through their process because there are a lot of moving pieces. It's a complicated project, and they're going to have to accumulate a lot of money that I'm not sure they know where to find. This seems to be moving much faster. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on the pacing of that. But also, I think important to the comp plan will be north-south frequent service in East Portland, probably on 122nd, which I know is would be contemplated, I think, in TriMet's district service planning process that they're going. So how do all those fit together relative to each other, and how will they come together to support what we're trying to do in the comp plan?
Okay. Well, let's see if I can break this apart into a few pieces here as I try to make my way through it. And I might have to call on Brian back here for a little bit about the timing and the pace of this project as compared to the Southwest Corridor and what we're looking for. But I think within the sort of the more local service planning project, so TriMet is on this committee and is working in this, and they are currently doing their service enhancement planning, as you mentioned. And so what we're trying to do as we do this as a collaborative project is figure out, when we put this line in, what are the, how does this relate to the service enhancement? So if they do put, better service on 122nd, how can we make sure that this better connects to it? Another question we'll have through this that we will sort of weigh against what service enhancement planning pieces they'll be working on is, if we do move from one street to another as we move through the corridor, what's the best connection? So I think we're just trying to coordinate those pieces and make sure that they work together. With the comprehensive plan itself, as we look through the corridor and look at the nodes, we are looking at our centers. And we're saying, where does this line pass through our centers? Which centers can this help develop? So we're trying to coordinate that piece. And then if you look on the map app, you would see that part of Powell and part of Division are listed as civic corridors. And so we are trying to keep this in line as well with the existing, the designations that we're putting forward with the comprehensive planning process. It also relates, though, to other projects. So say, for example, there's the Division Neighborhood Streets Plan, and they're looking at improving pedestrian connectivity, I think, from Holgate to Stark. And that crosses right across this corridor. So we're trying to mesh all these pieces together.
Joe?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Chris. And one of the ways that we've been looking at this vis-a-vis the comp plan is the corridor itself was already designated in the regional high-capacity transit list. So number 2, not a surprise. And The kind of places and the kind of populations that this high-capacity transit could serve are very much aligned with our Portland Plan objectives. And that's true for us all the way to Gresham. The kind of destinations that are linked by this line, we think has both community development potential, but also equity potential too. The main center-like locations it crosses are 82nd, and that's what's interesting about this plan that we get to do here is it helps us explore, start to really get more detailed than even our comprehensive plan bubbles about how the heck one creates a center on a stretch of 82nd, because that pattern and that approach, I believe, is going to be the approach we take to 82nd ultimately, right? So we're starting in a very meaty section of it because we've got PCC, we've got some good destinations there. It's actually relatively, big pieces of land. It's a sort of going concerns. So that's going to be very interesting. It allows us also to explore or maybe call our own bluff on the ability to deliver neighborhood centers farther east. We know the lack of those neighborhood centers is something we've been talking about for a long time in the comp plan. So 122nd and Division is a good one for us to explore. We explore it through this project as a transit location, but it also allows us to explore it for centers. So it's lining up actually in a way that we consider this an implementation project to the comp plan that you're working your way through.
The question of balancing this with Southwest Corridor, it is completely independent, or are they going to compete with each other for attention and resources?
So I'm going to bring Brian Momberg up, and he can answer that question for you guys.
And then I'll give, well, I think from the city's point of view, yes. They compete for resources, I mean, but they're both are different projects on potentially different time frames.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So again, my name is Brian Monberg, and I will be serving as the project manager for Metro. And per the question about prioritization and the projects, that's really one of the roles that Metro can play as facilitator of those regional discussions. So Metro is having that conversation with all of the regional partners and coordinating our regional transit investments. In terms of Southwest Corridor, it was identified as the priority moving out of the regional high-capacity transit plan and has been undergoing a process for a couple of years. So that has been moving forward. In terms of coordination, our Metro Council and our councilors are very involved in both projects. For example, Councilor Bob Stacy is a steering committee member of both Southwest Corridor as well as this. So we are certainly moving forward with the Southwest Corridor plan, and there's a lot of support, and I think we're moving forward appropriately per the timeline. Also recognizing that that's a larger corridor and that there are more partners, including more jurisdictional partners, which brings opportunity, potentially more support, and also challenges with the coordination. So in terms of this project, we are initiating the phase for planning it where Southwest Corridor was a couple years ago. We do think that looking at this project, that there are some opportunities that we have with agreement with partners. So as you've heard with the comp plan, as well as a lot of investments, there's some momentum toward bringing capital investments to East Portland through related efforts like the East Portland in Motion strategy and some of the other investments. And we see an opportunity to make sure that this transit solution is coordinated with those other capital investments. So that is some of the timing and some of the timeline interest for this. And there is a real present need. So in terms of coordination, I think that is a regional discussion that will continue to happen, and I think that Metro and partners feel pretty confident that they are moving independently with each other and very likely will have different funding streams to pursue in terms of getting capital funds to construct.
Other questions? So I have a kind of a question relative to the comp plan, but it's not really a question. It's more, as I see it, we're going to be looking at some land use issues through the comp plan to facilitate this. And when you look, especially you get beyond 82nd and get out there and you look at the land uses today, the businesses today, they're very diverse. I mean, that whole community is very diverse. And my concern, and really, I guess what I will be looking for in the future is we'll probably facilitate displacement. I mean, in some form and how much. So as the economic strategy is put together, quantifying that displacement in some stretch. And then we have a gentrification policy, we have a equity policy, and how do we address that through the comp plan as a strategy going forward? Because that's, I mean, we're going to bring development, which we want. We are strategically thinking about it, but what are we doing with the people and the businesses that probably see this coming and are going to have to move and leave? Not because either they sold their property or they're renters and I don't know there's an answer today, but through the practice and especially the Title VI development of ethnic neighborhoods out there, we know the intended consequence this time. I mean, we truly do know that consequence. And so coming back and saying this is a strategy is going to be important to put in place that strategy along with the land use that we're looking for. Because we're looking for an improved land use of the building spaces out there and things. And so I don't need an answer today, but when it comes back, we should have a strategy, and that should be part of our comp plan for both Powell and Division.
And Andre, that's a key question that's built into our thinking about the project. And you know what's interesting about this corridor too? It passes through 2 neighborhood prosperity initiative sites. So to the extent that that's an approach to the kind of issues you're talking about, that we're still seeing how it works, you know, it's in sort of an experiment and that kind of thing. It's opportune to, at least we have that kind of tool, but also the new kind of knowledge about the dynamics and governance of a place that comes from having it. So it's a critical question to the project, some unique challenges on the whole route related to that, a few opportunities.
Well, yeah, and to me, it's trend-oriented development. This is what we're doing. We're intending for that development to occur. It's what we want for the neighborhoods, and how does that prosperity, which we want in those neighborhoods, translate to the people that are there today? And if it's not, you know, what's our strategy to try to at least capture part of that in the neighborhood from the people and the businesses and the homeowners and the renters that are there? I mean, a couple of partners that I didn't hear are the housing folks. And so how do you get housing involved? Because there's a lot of renters out in that corridor, those 2 corridors, and how do they, if you're raising rents, where do they go? I'm not gentrification for short term, which Howard raised, but I think addressing those and coming back and saying, here's not only what we're looking for, but also here's how we're addressing getting prosperity for people, which is part of our equity discussion, and then here's how we address the displacement that may occur through unintended consequences. It's not unintended.
I think I just wanted to second what Joe said for us, and I know that as we start this project, we're trying to start with sort of a more open eyes and more open understanding of the conditions on the corridor today. So in our existing conditions report, we have some basic information from the initial gentrification and displacement study. So the vulnerability to displacement study that Uma Krishnan put together. Yeah. And we're going to continue to work with that information as a base so that when we get to the point of saying, you know, here are some new major nodes that we want to develop a land use vision for, you know, we know a little bit more about the conditions than we did with previous projects. And hopefully we can integrate, so when we come up with a development strategy for the area, so if the community wants to see X, Y, and Z. How can we do it in a way that works? So hopefully through that community workshop process, we can start to come up with some programmatic solutions, building on the MPI work to build in some mechanisms to bring more communities into place. I don't know exactly how it's going to be done, but we definitely have the intention of doing our best to pay attention to that and really involve everybody in it more better than before.
I think it's important because also TriMet's looking at, I know they're involved in your committee, but I'm on the Transit Equity Committee, and when you look at the ridership out of these two lines in that area, a lot of people are transit dependent. As one of those two lines have a lot of transit dependent ridership, and it's good that they're going to get better transit, but if you disrupt their homes, where do they go to? That may not be as efficient for them to utilize transportation, the transportation we want. So making sure that it sounds like you've got those things in your sights, and we'll hear solutions when you come back, or at least tools from that standpoint.
We will do our best. We're definitely concerned about this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Question
Chris?
about how we're structuring the city's work on this. Compared with what we did for Southwest Corridor with the Barber Concept Plan, we put together kind of a traditional project with a stakeholder group. From what you described, it sounds like we have kind of a collection of smaller activities, but how will it be structured, and what will the public involvement methods be? Will it be one committee, or will it be a bunch of committees, or how's it all going to fit together?
Yeah, it is a bunch of smaller pieces. So like I said, Metro is I already got in trouble for not talking in the microphone. Metro is the overall convener of it, and they are running the broader public engagement for this piece. So they are responsible for the overall engagement part. What we will be looking at is sort of refining where the node should be and the community vision for those specific areas. So for community involvement for that, as we're just gathering the space information right now, we're going to go out and we will conduct our own, we will join in existing city events, and then perhaps if we can partner with TriMet with one of their service enhancement open houses coming up in the next couple months, and then hold an event ourselves, probably somewhere along the event, to gather basic bottom community information for this, so that we can develop a proposal. And then in the fall, we will go out with our recommended major nodes and development options and redevelopment types and the economic assessment of certain areas, and then hold community workshops around specific areas. So we would be responsible for working on the land use vision and then the different development strategies for those specific nodes. We haven't convened or developed our own advisory committee for this part of the process. So that is not something that we thought about yet. Or thinking that the broader community outreach is the Metro piece, and that we would hold specific events and gather input, but we didn't convene a group yet. And if that is advised, then we will.
Well, I can see why, the kind of monthly stakeholder meeting process that the Southwest Corridor had, wouldn't be terribly workable for the set of problems that you have to look at. But I guess I would ask you to think about what's the process by which you're going to get validation for the community that you got the answers right at the end of this process. I think, using the events and other things that are going on, it's probably a good strategy, but how do you do that check-in at the end to make sure you've got the answer right?
And the situation is a little different here than it was on Southwest, in that, remember the last time we tried to do a plan for that stretch of the Southwest Corridor, we ended up collectively drawing a big bubble around it and saying, no plan, we'll come back to it. Move on. Yeah. And so we knew that we were covering a lot of old ground that had been left for a few decades. When we approached our network of communities on PAL Division, the feedback was quite different, in that that need of really thinking through what the most, the direction the corridor and the places along the corridor want to go, they felt they had a good enough foundation on that already, because and there's two really pretty functional community coalitions that cover all of it, and so we had a good solid infrastructure there. We had that in Southwest too, but we're starting from a different place. And we have the East Portland Action Plan. So we have April's already been doing work out there, and the PBOT work in terms of connecting in East Portland. We have these 2 MPIs. So we got infrastructure for outreach that gave us the reassurance that we could move more expeditiously. But it's good caution, Chris, that we can't just assume that everything's good with that. We have to check at the end, too.
And we would, so for example, in April, we're going to the Southeast Uplift meeting, and we've been to the, staff has been to the EPAP meeting already, so we're planning to keep in pretty regular contact with those organizations as well.
I have to ask a question for Karen. School districts that are out there, are they part of your committee?
We have the community college on the committee, but I do not see the school districts on the committee.
Right, and so the whole route is PPS or David Douglas, so for
David
sure
Douglas
we'll need
was
to
the
reach
one.
out to David
Yeah.
Douglas.
David Douglas,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Centennial.
And
So we can
Centennial.
reach out
Yeah.
to them in our
Okay.
outreach.
Just, okay. Just had to make the call.
Channel commissioners very well.
Yeah, near miss.
Just as you leave, I'm curious, who owns the lots that are set aside for transit where the bus stops? I noticed in one of your slides, there was a bus stop, and then there's a place for what, 30 cars, 25 cars? What was that lot?
ODOT.
They own a lot of them?
They own all of the those parking lots. Those are
All
remnant.
along those two, I mean, that's an interesting dynamic around parking in the neighborhood in general. How that, I don't want to get into the whole issue of parking, for God's sake, but I was struck by the fact that here are these set-asides on a very busy street for at least 20 people to leave their car that are, what, 18 blocks from transit or 12 blocks from transit?
Do you want to speak to that, April?
I could speak to your first question. I might need you to repeat. Oh, sorry. I can speak to your first question. I might ask you to repeat the second part. I didn't hear the whole thing. But it is, as Radcliffe said, it's actually public right-of-way. It's ODOT right-of-way. They're not all tax lots themselves, but just wider right-of-way at those locations.
Yeah, well, the right-of-way that ODOT chooses to earmark as parking.
Actually, this was, I think, in partnership with the city. So
Is it designated parking or just right-of-way?
it is public parking. My understanding from back in the, so that part of Outer Powell, the boulevard treatment that you see today, including those public parking lots and the change the circulation, was built in the 70s in part with the funding that came from not building Mount Hood Freeway.
Okay.
And so some of that right-of-way.
Reparations on that one.
And then approaching the boulevard treatment, there was also the creation of some areas that required no off-street parking for the businesses. And so there's a plan district, I believe still in the zoning code today, that has a special overlay in these areas. And so part of it was to provide this public parking that could support those businesses, and they didn't have to provide their own parking. So, but it is public. It's anyone
No
can.
permit required?
No. No.
Okay, well, it'd be interesting to document where all those are along both the corridors to see how they integrate not only transit's accommodation and your goodwill in letting them use the ground, but how else it could integrate the whole comp plan of the neighborhood. It's just a whole new resource I hadn't thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Free
Indeed.
parking by the bus.
We'll be looking at the opportunities, yes.
Other questions? Michelle?
So is PDC involved at this stage?
PDC is not officially involved at this stage, but we are looking to reach out to them and work with them on the node identification and the node work for sure.
I think in terms of displacement and gentrification concerns and the inability of the comp plan to deal with all of it,
Yeah.
Bringing them in to start looking at other strategies.
Certainly, as we look to connect with them more, particularly around the neighborhood prosperity initiative, so we hope to.
Joe?
Yeah, and you know, the main focus with our work at with PDC right now along this corridor is around the Lentz Town Center plan, which is getting a redo at PDC. And so we're deeply involved in that discussion. And as part of that, have provided you know, the drill down analysis that was called for in our gentrification study as, you know, what you do once you're doing one of these to them, and we're going to do the same thing along the whole iPod corridor. So we're engaged with both PDC and the Bureau of Housing around Lentz, and so they know this is coming too as well. And the same kind of tactics that we're talking about for Lentz will be mappable to other parts of our corridor, except for most of the corridor doesn't have urban renewal, but you know, that big center node around 82nd and the freeway and Powhurst Gilbert does. 122nd to about 82nd.
Okay. Good catch. I like getting PDC. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Good work. And look forward to it. We are adjourned because we're out of.
I just did it for you.
No, we're lost a
banged the
quorum.
gavel.
We lost a quorum too.
We lost a quorum?
Yeah.
Well, then forget what you said, April. Come back
Was
with
this
another
last-
idea for parking lots.
You
No,
can do
she's
whatever you
here
want
during
now.
that.
Huh?
She was here during that.
They're the what?